It's a fact that fact checkers are checking facts. It's also a fact that these fact checkers have no idea what a fact really is. We will analyze the history, not merely of fact checking, but of facts themselves. Then the APA deems masculinity harmful. Starbucks needs to install needle disposals in their bathrooms. And finally, the mailbag. I'm Michael Knowles, and this is The Michael Knowles Show. The left has now decayed so much that it doesn't even understand what a fact is. We will get to that in a second, but first, let me tell you one fact that is totally incontrovertible. Ring's mission is to make neighborhoods safer, and they are succeeding at doing that. Today, over 1 million people use the amazing Ring video doorbell to help protect their homes. Ring knows home security begins at the front door, but does it end there? No way does it end there. That's why they're extending that same level of security to the rest of your home with the Ring Floodlight Cam. Just like Ring's amazing doorbell, the Floodlight Cam is a motion-activated camera and floodlight that connects right to your phone with HD video and two-way audio that lets you know the moment anyone steps onto your property. You, my viewers, may have encountered this when you were trying to burglarize someone's home and then the light came on and you heard somebody yelling at you to go away. So you're familiar with the technology. It's really impressive stuff. I love it. Whether you're home or away, the Ring Floodlight Cam lets you keep an eye on your home from anywhere. This is the ultimate in in-home security. In the old days, they had Neighborhood Watch and all that kind of stuff. That's old-timey. Use the new stuff. This is way better, way more effective, very inexpensive. Right now, you can save up to $150 off a Ring of Security kit when you go to ring.com/Knowles, Knowles. Ring.com/Knowles, Knowles. Ring.com/Knowles. There may be nothing more irksome to me in our very shallow modern political dialogue than the phrase fact-checking. Fact-checking is this phrase that has come about. It's exploded in the last 5 or 10 years. It is used largely, if not exclusively, by the left. And I can't tell if they're being obtuse or if they're ignorant. I guess it's not, when it comes to the left, that's not mutually exclusive. But they actually don't know what a fact is. You saw the fact-checking explode during President Trump's speech the other night from the Oval Office. Let's just look at, there were every left-wing outlet did a fact-check. Then you have to fact-check the fact-checkers and fact. Let's just look at one of the fact-checkers, John King, on CNN, and just to exemplify how wrong even the premise of fact-checking is.
Did he get it done?
He created a sense of crisis and urgency along the way. He also created a lot of business for the fact-check machines. The president says a wall will stop the drugs, the heroin, the fentanyl, the other opioids. Most of the drugs, his own government says, come in through legal points of entry, where there's commerce, where there's crossing. A wall will not block the legal points of entry. The president said again, the New Mexico Free Trade Agreement will indirectly pay for the wall. It's not how it works. Money created, trade deficits, trade surplus doesn't go into the United States Treasury for free spending on other programs. The president also said, this is powerful, when he talks about these heinous, unacceptable, reprehensible crimes, murders, assaults committed by people illegally in this country. No question, they're heinous and reprehensible. But the statistics show you that the crime rate among immigrants is actually lower than the crime rate among non-immigrants. So that's cherry picking and seizing and trying to create an emotional response. He also talked about the economic impact. They're taking jobs from especially African Americans and Latinos. A lot of American corporations would tell you right now, they can't find workers. They're desperate for workers, in part because of a strong economy this president should be claiming credit for. So,
boom. Boom, you see those fact checks? Now, I know John King was speaking in his news presenter voice, and he was on television, so it sounds like what he's saying should be true, but it wasn't. It isn't true. No fact that he mentioned in that diatribe contradicts any of the facts that President Trump mentioned in his speech. Just to go through what John King said. He said that a wall wouldn't stop the drugs from coming into this country. We have this awful opioid crisis. It's so bad now that in large part because of drug overdoses, you now have the average life expectancy of Americans decreasing for the first time in 50 years. He says that a wall would not stop the flow of drugs into America, wouldn't help reduce the flow of drugs. This is not true. He cites the drug enforcement agencies of the federal government. The Drug Enforcement Agency has also said that subterranean tunnels are a major route of illegal drugs into the country. President Trump's proposal for the wall includes digging that wall 6 feet down to cut off some of those tunnels. And to say nothing of the fact that if you have this giant border along the wall, it's going to be much easier to police where those tunnels are cropping up, where people are showing up, than if people are just willy-nilly running across unpoliced border. So that one just isn't true. How about, he says, boom, fact check. Better trade agreements with Mexico are not going to help Americans pay for the wall because the federal government doesn't get all of that money. Well, yes and no. And actually, when you've got a more robust economy, then you've got a greater number of tax receipts going to the government. So tax receipts to the government increases dramatically because people are making more money. They're paying more taxes on all of that money. So in that sense, the government does get more taxes. Also, how is Mexico going to pay for the wall? Let's say that American taxpayers do have to pay for the wall. Let's say that these new trade agreements do help the economy, but they don't really offset it with tax receipts to the government. Well, Americans have greater wealth as a result of that robust economy and better trade deals. So money is fungible, right? Either the money is coming from the federal government or state government, or it's coming out of your own pocket. But either way, if you are getting more money, then in a certain sense, Mexico is paying for the wall or part of the wall or whatever. So his fact there, also not true. And then finally, this idea that illegal aliens don't commit crime. They commit crime at a much lower rate than native-born citizens. This isn't true. This might be true in certain state crimes or local crimes, but we know that illegal aliens are 2.5 times as likely as non-illegal aliens, as legal residents and citizens, to commit federal crimes. Now, you could say federal crimes don't make up even a large percentage of all crimes. Okay, that's fine. How about on the economy? On the economy, we know that illegal immigration hurts low-skilled American workers. President Trump says this in particular affects black Americans. This in particular affects some legal immigrants from Latin America. That is true. That is undeniable. Illegal immigration floods the country largely with low-skilled immigrants. Who does this hurt? Low-skilled Americans. For instance, you have, these are just estimates from various think tanks, 7.4 million illegal alien workers competing with the 43 million other low-skilled workers in America. Call it about an even 50 million low-skilled workers in America. Well, of those low-skilled workers, black workers account for 5.6 million. And black workers have the highest unemployment rates of that whole $50 million pie. Higher unemployment rates than illegal aliens in the same arena. This simply makes sense. The fact that black Americans are more likely than other demographics to be low-skilled workers means that when you flood the labor market with other low-skilled workers, they are going to be disproportionately affected. You can't argue with that. That's simple economics. So there's the fact check, there are the facts, the fact check, and then the fact check of the fact check. What does a fact check mean? Because I'm not just taking issue with John King. I'm not just taking issue with fact checkers at CNN and the Washington Post and all of these other left-wing outlets. I'm taking issue. The problem essentially is with the idea of fact-checking itself. On yesterday's show, we defended alternative facts because the left has misconstrued alternative facts to mean untruths or the opposite of true things. In reality, what Kellyanne Conway very clearly said when she was talking about alternative facts is that the left presents one narrative and a small set of facts, and then alternative facts, which are also true, will give greater context and put the whole event into a different light, and it will likely contradict the left-wing narrative. Where did this idea of fact-checking in the public media come about? Factcheck.org was founded around 2003. Snopes is a famous fact checker. It was actually founded a little earlier in 1994, but it was originally just to debunk urban legends. It wasn't primarily political at all. It only really got political around 2003, actually around the same time as factcheck.org. The Washington Post created its fact checker, its public fact checker, in 2007. So what's going on? This is all happening around the same time. It's not as though public fact-checking has been around as long as journalism has been around. It's a relatively new phenomenon. Now, fact-checking as an editorial job has been around forever. When a reporter turns in a story, it's usually an editor's job or some editor's job to fact-check it. say, oh no, you got this number wrong, you got this number wrong. When you write a book, I don't know about writing books, but I know about publishing books. When you write a book, you hand it into the publisher, and then they'll have fact checkers go through and make sure that everything is right. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this public fact checking. John King going on CNN, the Washington Post publishing a fact checking column. It all began around this time, the mid-2000s. It's gotten much wider in recent years. The fundamental point here is that fact checkers do not check facts, but they give leftist opinion, and they call it fact-checking. Most fact-checking that we see, from John King on CNN to the Washington Post or whatever, is actually an op-ed column, usually from the leftist point of view, that is trying to pretend that it's not presenting a political or partisan point of view, so it calls itself objective and neutral and fact-checking. Where does this come from? It's actually not just CNN's fault. It's not just even the left's fault. It's a problem of modernity. It's a problem of our modern culture. Our conception of a fact, what a fact is, has become absurd. So you hear this dichotomy all the time. Look, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts, which is a meaningless statement. It doesn't mean anything, because an opinion is the facts as somebody sees them. So when I give my opinion, I am stating the facts from my point of view, from my perception. An opinion is not the same as a preference. For instance, salty leftist tears are my favorite drink. I really, really like salty leftist tears. I really like salty leftist tears is my preference. Some people might not like salty leftist tears. They must be insane if they don't, because they're so tasty and yummy, but that's my preference. Now, if I were to say leftist tears are very, very salty and delicious, that's a statement of fact, and it's my opinion, because that's what an opinion is. What does the word fact mean? The word fact, F-A-C-T, means something done. I guess that would be one way to describe the etymology of it. It comes from the Latin facere, and the past tense of that would be, in Latin it would be factum, in Italian it would be fatto, in Spanish it's hecho, in French it's fait. You see before or after the fact. A fact is discrete, it's concrete, it's something done. The reason that we are so confused over what a fact is in our modern society comes out of the Enlightenment. It comes out of David Hume in particular, who gave us something called the fact-value distinction. The fact-value distinction is to say that you can't derive an ought from an is. So I can't say, this is a tumbler of salty, delicious leftist tears, therefore I should drink it. That's what David Hume would say. He's obviously wrong. If you see a tumbler of salty, delicious leftist tears, you have to drink it. How could you resist? You wouldn't be human if you could resist it. That's where that idea comes from, the fact-value distinction. So what the left wants to say with all of their fact-checking is, look, I'm not saying you should do this or you should do that, or this is what I like or don't like, or this is good or this is bad, or this is my opinion. All I'm saying is this is what it is. And then conveniently for these left-wing fact-checkers, when they just call it like it is, the world is what it is, it always defends their narrative. One person who in modern times has pushed back against this concept is Alistair McIntyre. He wrote a book that was going around the Daily Wire. I think all of our shows, we've talked about it before. He pointed out that this idea of the fact-value distinction is fairly new. So, and it's obviously there are counterexamples to it. So, for instance, if the idea is you can't derive something that you should do, you can't derive an ought from an is, what about the sentence, quote, he is a sea captain, he ought to do, therefore, whatever a sea captain ought to do. And that's kind of a silly example, but it's a real example. It shows that you can derive evaluative conclusions from factual premises. If I say, another McIntyre example, if I say this watch can't keep time, this watch is really, really heavy, I would never say that about my movement watch, because my movement watch is one of the greatest watches ever made. But if I were to say that hypothetically, then you could conclude it's not a good watch. You can draw an evaluative conclusion from a factual premise. Now, to bring this into real politics, the politics we're talking about today, if I observe a few facts, drugs are pouring over our southern border with Mexico. 60 to 80% of women and girls who cross that border illegally are raped. Human beings are trafficked over that border. Our political regime is being compromised. Our democratic republic is being compromised because illegal aliens are being counted for population and representation in the House of Representatives. We have laws on the books that say that you can't enter this country illegally. I can draw from those factual observations the evaluative conclusion that perhaps we should build a wall along that border. I can draw that conclusion. I'm telling you the facts. I'm stating the facts. Now, the Democrats will tell you, therefore, we shouldn't build a wall. They'll try to draw different evaluative conclusions, but it's from this mistaken idea of a fact. I'll just, to use the border example, let's look at a clear one. The Border Patrol chief under Barack Obama, who actually was replaced by President Trump, he was on Tucker Carlson explaining the rationale for the border.
Joining us tonight is Mark Morgan. He's the former head of the Border Patrol under Barack Obama. He was then replaced by the Trump administration, and we're glad to talk to him again for the second time this week. Mr. Morgan, thanks a lot for coming back. When you hear the term manufactured crisis from politicians and their lackeys in the press, what's your response?
My response is that those people that are saying that, anybody that says that, Tucker, is misinformed, and they're misleading the American people. So before I was even chief of the Border Patrol, I served in the FBI for 2 decades. One of my assignments is I led the El Paso office. From my office, right on the border, I could see Juarez. Every single day, Tucker, we worked with the DEA and all components of DHS, and we worked human trafficking cases, we worked drug cases, and we worked and gang cases, all impacting the southern border. And then as chief, every single day, Tucker, I was briefed every single day about the men and women who are risking their lives every day, and they're apprehending murderers, rapists, pedophiles, other violent offenders, and gang members. That's not manufactured. That is real, and that's a fact, and it's still happening today.
That is real, and that is a fact. He is talking about facts. He's talking about how many people we're apprehending, what people are coming over that border, what they're bringing over that border. Those are facts. A fact is a thing that's been done. That's a fact. Now, usually, when we're talking about fact-checking and fact-checkers, we're not arguing over facts. I guess sometimes we are. Sometimes left-wingers just want to put their head in the sand and close their ears and close their eyes and say, la, 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 la. So they'll say, no, we don't have people coming over the border illegally. We're not compromising our electoral system. There aren't drugs coming up. Maybe they say that, but I think that's the fringe. I think most left-wingers will tell you, yes, people are crossing the border, but they should cross the border. Yes, there are millions and millions of people crossing the border, but that's a good thing. Yes, we don't really have solid borders right now as a nation, but we shouldn't have solid borders as a nation. They're not arguing over what the facts are. They're arguing over the meaning of facts, which makes perfect sense. Again, this is another one of these errors that we are now grappling with in our modern politics that comes out of the Enlightenment, that comes out of the fact-value distinction. Maybe it's possible, it is entirely possible, I guess, that the left just doesn't understand this. The left, because it has such shallow thinking when it comes to philosophy and politics and history, maybe they don't quite get this. But if they don't, then listen up, guys. I hope you're watching. We're arguing over the meaning of facts. We're arguing over the meaning of things. This is why conservatives should always talk about the culture. We talked yesterday about the different reactions to President Trump's Oval Office address, and we said the people who are usually Trump critics, maybe they were never Trump, they're the fiscal first conservatives, I would call them. They just want to talk about dollars and cents. They think the speech should have been about how the border is not that expensive and it's not that big a deal, and come on guys, let's not worry about it. And then the people who really liked the speech, such as myself, or maybe the people who wrote the speech or whoever, they're the cultural conservatives. They're the ones who say, go for the gore, go for the graphics, go for the moral arguments, go for the emotion, go for the faces of the victims of people of these awful crimes. That's the reason we have to make those stands, is because we're not arguing over the facts. Nobody really is arguing over whether the wall will cost X billion dollars or X plus $3 billion. Nobody cares about that. That's bean counting. What we care about is not the facts, but but what the facts imply, what they mean, the meanings that they carry. So, for instance, if the sort of fiscal first conservatives or the conciliatory conservatives want to say, look, let's just talk about forget about the things we're disagreeing on, forget about these graphic, gruesome, grotesque images. Let's just talk about what we can agree on. $5 billion isn't that much money. When you talk about only what we can agree on, you've lost the argument, because the left has a much narrower view of politics than we do. If we come in and say, okay, we're going to accept all of the left's premises and we're going to argue with them over the conclusions, we've already lost. We can't accept those premises. That is a recipe for losing. You know, facts have, I guess there are physical facts. We're talking about physical facts like 1,000 illegal aliens a day at least crossing the border on average. And you can talk about metaphysical facts, the metaphysical facts of laws, the metaphysical facts of the moral laws, the metaphysical facts that govern our politics. Those are facts as well. And when you're talking about the meaning of them, what that implies, it might be less comfortable, it might be less clean cut. You know, you can't really do it in a sound bite. You can't do it in a CNN Don King sound bite, or John King, or whatever his name is. Is Don King the boxing guy with the crazy hair? Yeah, you could. I would prefer if we did it with Don King, actually. But that, if CNN, if any of the executives are watching, that's my recommendation for your hiring. But you can't do it with that. You can't do that with a little chart or a Vox.com article that says, boom, fact checked. Because we're not talking about things that happened or things that didn't happen most of the time. What we're talking about is the meaning of those things. And when you talk about the meaning of those things, you need a more sophisticated moral dialogue. You need to look past these shallow little premises of our very highly modern and rationalist politics, and you need to talk a little bit more deeply. The border really brings this one up. You know, when it comes to the border, I think a lot of people think, well, you know, nobody really wants all amnesty. Nobody really wants open borders. Nobody really wants these things. Yes, I agree. I agree. Probably in reality, the vast majority of people don't want open borders and people flooding our country. Public opinion polls show that too. But we've got to then be able to talk in a more nuanced way, a more sophisticated way. You can't just talk about numbers and dollars and cents and say, boom, fact checked. That isn't how an advanced society works. That isn't how civilized society works. An even clearer example of this is abortion. You see the problem of the fact-value distinction in the abortion argument. You'll say, hey, maybe we shouldn't kill all those unborn babies. And then the left will say, an unborn baby is a fetus, and that's a fact. That's just a scientific fact. It's a fetus, or it's an embryo, or it's a blastula, or it's a zygote, and they're using all these made-up words that refer to various things, and that people who have categorized human life at various stages have arbitrarily chosen. They will say those things, but you're not actually getting to the meaning of the fact. The fact is the human person. From the moment of conception, through the phase that they call zygote, through the phase that they call blastula or whatever, through the glioblast, I don't know what they call, to the phrase that they call embryo, to fetus, to baby, to toddler, to child, to adult. The question is the human person, and if you want to talk about that person, you have to get past these petty little shallow understandings of what a fact is, and you have to realize that that human person, whether you call it a zygote or whether you call it a bratty teenager, has a certain meaning. It has a certain import that we have to deal with, and you're not going to deal with that with Don King or John King or any king on CNN. It's an empty slogan. I mean, I guess that's really what we have to remember here. Fact-checking is an empty slogan. And one example of this, it just came out in the American Psychological Association. The APA has decided that traditional masculinity, as opposed to that newfangled masculinity, I don't know what that is. I think that's femininity. I think there's the new masculinity is femininity, but the traditional masculinity, which is masculinity, that's harmful. This is what they say. They say, quote, the main thrust of subsequent research is that traditional masculinity, marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is, on the whole, harmful. Masculinity ideology whatever that is defined by the APA as a particular constellation of standards that have held sway over large segments of the population, including anti-femininity, achievement, eschewal of the appearance of weakness, and adventure, risk, and violence. Now, just as again, a point of language, we've got to be really clear about our language, because when we're not clear, the left perverts language and totally wins the culture and totally wins politics. If something is true for virtually all of human history across civilizations, as the APA is saying this definition of masculinity is, then by definition it's not an ideology. It's not a formalized, rationalized abridgment of some tradition. It's the tradition itself. So they're using that word incorrectly to make it seem like this random, arbitrary thing that popped up. Masculinity is not a random, arbitrary thing. There were downsides to masculinity, over-aggressiveness, whatever. There are many upsides. Masculinity is pretty beneficial, I think, to nations at war. If someone declares war on your nation, I think you would hope that you've got masculine men in that nation. If you're being victimized by a criminal, perhaps you would hope that a masculine man will come up and protect you. Perhaps you would hope that you're masculine enough yourself to defend yourself. Also, people dealing with the realities of life. And this is the one that we can all get. We're not all going to find ourselves in a back alley getting jumped, but we all will deal with the realities of life. And the realities of life require a little bit of grit, a little bit of fortitude, a little bit, you might say, of masculinity. And this is an example of the road to hell being paved with good intentions. What is really harmful, what's actually harmful, is sending out, as we're seeing now, as a generational problem, weak little buttercups into the world and then watching them crumble. And we are watching them crumble. I'm not being hyperbolic. Rates of depression, anxiety, stress among millennials and younger are through the roof. Teen suicide is up 70%. Prescription depression drugs are way up. This is because you have an entire generation, now I guess 2 generations, that has been told that weakness is a virtue and that strength is a vice. And so when they go out and they meet the realities of life, which are very difficult, even if we had the wonderful, most well-behaved society, people would get sick and die. Unfair things would happen. And by the way, we don't have the perfect, totally fair society, so there are going to be more hardships than that. It's no benefit to anybody to tell people to be weak. And the APA, in just talking about the facts, in just talking about the science, is forming conclusions that are absurd. They are writing left-wing op-eds, which I'm not surprised. I mean, they are conveying a leftist political narrative and pretending that it is science. It is exactly the same thing that John King is doing on CNN or the Washington Post is doing, or all of those other left-wing news outlets. Unfortunately, this has affected not just psychology, but much of our academic establishment, and it's not true. We have to point out to them that those facts aren't facts. It's their interpretation of the facts. It's their narrative of the meaning of the facts. And what we need to do is present to them something different. You might say we need to present to them alternative facts, and we need to present to them an alternative interpretation of the facts. We've got a lot more to get to, but we don't have time, so we're going to cut right to the mailbag. But first, go over to dailywire.com. Why? What do you get? What don't you get at this point? You get me. You get the Andrew Klavan Show. You get the Ben Shapiro Show. You get the Matt Walsh Show. You get to ask questions in the mailbag coming up. You get to ask questions in Backstage. You get to watch Another Kingdom. You get everything. You get everything. But most importantly, you get this, the Leftist Tears Tumbler. And let me tell you something. There's no alternative to the Leftist Tears Tumbler. This is a fact. You can derive an ought from this fact, which is you ought to drink those salty, delicious leftist tears. Otherwise, you're going to drown. You don't want that to happen. Go over there right now, $9.99 a month, $100 for an annual membership. You get all of that and so much more. Go to dailywire.com. We'll be right back with the mailbag.